My name is Faraz Harsini. I'm a senior scientist at GFI, bioprocessing senior scientist, and I went vegan in 2012. I went vegan because one of my friends pointed out that I can't say I love animals and eat them too, which made me really upset. I was really upset at her. Didn't talk to her for 3 months because I was like, how dare you challenging my morality? But after 3 months, I was like, she was right.
So your friend just up and says this?
Yeah, so I'm from Iran, and there is this tradition that people buy golden fish for New Year. And then I was trying to encourage Iranians not to do that. So I went to her and I said, would you help me with graphic design of this poster so I can encourage them not to buy goldfish? She said, well, it doesn't really make sense because you eat other animals and then you're just like worried about this fish here. That's how she said that.
Was that the only time you've ever found yourself worried about another animal?
No, in fact, even before going vegan, I was always against like hunting, animal testing. I didn't know, there was a time that I thought animal testing was necessary, so I was like, I really feel for these animals. I felt really terrible. So I felt bad for them, but I thought it was necessary. I always felt, I'm from Iran, I saw animals being sacrificed on the street. I love meat, so I kind of convinced myself that it's just 1 second of them suffering, so it's not significant amount of suffering. So that's how I convinced myself. But I think I always cared for animals.
Had you ever heard of the word vegan prior to that?
No, actually, even vegetarianism in Iran, unlike India, it's really like, at least back then, 10, 15 years ago, it was just like a health thing that, some like weird people did. So it wasn't like about animal rights or just none of that at all. And veganism was not, I've never heard of veganism, that people just not eating like dairy and egg, not at all.
And so had you ever even thought about like just not eating them?
Not really. Like no one ever came to me to say that, hey, why are you eating animals? I guess that goes hand in hand with misunderstanding and, miseducation and all that. Like my mom raised me. I remember I never liked meat, but like my parents always said, eat the meat. That's how you make blood. Even in Iran, we sometimes eat the bone marrow. So it's just like you smash big bones to remove the bone marrow. And my mom was like, eat that because that's how you make blood. And it's like, now I know that that's not how it works. But you feel like you need them. No one really talks about animal abuse. You don't see the footage. You think that, it's just 1 second of cutting their throat. They don't really suffer that much. Even after my friend pointed out the hypocrisy, I remember telling myself, it's just 1 second. Sorry animals, I love meat so much that it just overcomes that like 1 second that, you suffer. Which now I think about it, I'm not proud of myself for thinking that way.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think people think that way? Is it just their parents and society, and mostly is that the way that culture is more than other cultures? Do you feel like there's more like acceptance for this alternative here?
I don't really know the role that culture plays because I talk to people a lot, and some people say, oh, like I'm Hispanic and you have no idea, in Hispanic culture we just, we are so into meat or whatever. But you also talk to an American, he says, oh, in our culture it's like hot dog and whatever. You talk to the German guy, he says, oh, you have no idea, we eat so much like bratwurst and stuff. And then you talk to Iranian, he says, oh, our culture, we eat kebab. Like, I feel like every culture you talk to people, it's based on meat. So I think people think that it's just their culture, but it's like every culture. And I don't really think that there is any culture that is particularly, it's like really hard to become vegan. But of course there is that bias. I'm from Iran. Of course I feel like it's harder in my culture, but everyone says that. So if everyone thinks their culture is really hard, that just probably means that no culture is particularly hard. It's just that I honestly think when people think going vegan is hard, it's just in their head. Like when they think about it, they're like, oh, my parents, my friends are gonna make fun of me. They think vegan food sucks. It's not gonna be tasty. So it's all in their head. once they sit down and just like know the options, every time I say there is vegan cheese, a lot of people are surprised. When I say there is vegan egg, people are surprised. So it's in their head.
So for 3 months, you were mad at your friend?
Yeah, pretty
Like,
much.
what was going on in your head, like, for 3 months?
I don't know. I just shut down. The problem was my friend, as much as I love her, she is vegetarian, or I don't know about now, but at the time she was vegetarian, and vegetarians often don't push. And I really wish she pushed harder. All she said was, you say you love animals, but you eat them. That's it. She didn't say, hey, this is Dominion, this is Earthlings, watch this, Google that, answer any questions, none of that. So because of that, I really just didn't think about it. And I loved meat so much that I didn't even think that I could ever go vegan or vegetarian at the time. That's one thing that I think it's really important for people to go vegan, because you often have vegans pushing more. And pushing here doesn't mean that you have to be aggressive or militant, but it means that you advocate for it. You say, hey, sit down here, sit down, let me show you this. This is why you need to go vegan. You don't have that passion in vegetarians often. How could you have? Because they are kind of the part of a problem in a way.
3 months goes by. What changed in 3 months to make you suddenly go, she's right or something, or what?
I don't really remember. I remember that I loved meat so much that I was like, there is no way I go out with my friends and they have like pizza and I'm like, no, thank you, I'm gonna have my salad. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna start from just not buying meat at home. But when I go out, I'm just gonna eat whatever, because I couldn't see it in myself to be that strong. But honestly, when I stopped buying meat, one day I went out and my friend I ordered a falafel and my friend had chicken, and he actually offered me some chicken, and I looked at it, I was like, no thanks, I'm a vegetarian. So that was June 3rd, I had to go back. I was so excited eventually for refusing to eat meat that I texted one of my friends, and later on I had to go back and find that text, and that's how I know. So I basically changed my birthday to June 3rd, because I think that was the date that I did something so meaningful. Unlike the day I was born, I didn't have anything to do with it. This was probably the most important decision that I made that changed everything else that I did after that point. So
after that, what made you go vegan?
Even when I was vegetarian, I had no idea about milk and egg, nothing. I even remember there are these people who are so extreme, they don't even consume dairy or egg. But when I moved to the US, so this happened in Germany when I went vegetarian. When I came to the US, I was offered, YouTube offered me this video with German subtitle, and the video was like 101 or 1001 reasons to go vegan.
Maybe it was James Wildman?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I interviewed him.
It's a very old video,
The
presentation.
red light,
Yeah, exactly. And it had German subtitle. I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to practice my English, because I just came to the US. And also it has German subtitles, so I don't forget my German, because I was studying German. Little I knew the whole thing was to convince me to go vegan, and it worked.
Wow, that's cool. So after you went vegetarian, did you notice anything different physiologically, mentally, or emotionally that was the result of making that change?
Not when I went vegetarian. I feel like I don't have a clear memory of how I actually felt. Maybe because I was still consuming animal product. But I remember when I went vegan, there was this weird feeling that I always went to this lake to watch ducks. I mean, I never ate ducks, but for some reason when I went vegan, I had this kind of connection that I'm sitting here so peacefully and I'm not eating like animals, I'm not causing extra suffering. And for 3 or 4 months, it felt so good. When I went to bed, I felt like I'm not causing suffering. And that felt really good. And then after that, I started why can't other people see what I see? So when I started talking to people and I see how resistant they are, then I started getting really mad. But for 3 or 4 months, it was a really good feeling.
Weren't you worried maybe about needing to eat animals for health reasons at all?
I don't think I even considered it back in the day. Just knew that there are people who are vegan and they're fine. Didn't really think about health. And that, in fact, became a thing after I started graduate school. I did my master's in cancer center, in cancer research, and then I realized 4 out of 10 incidences of cancers are preventable, and a lot of it has to do with, consumption of red meat. And I have this memory. My advisor for cancer center for my master's, he was actually really famous. He's a very famous scientist. One day I asked him, we were at a party and he was like eating pork, a lot of it. And I said, I was very nervous. I said, can I ask you something? I said, sure. I was like, you are a famous cancer researcher and you know this is carcinogenic. Like, how is it possible that you know that and you're still eating this? And he said, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll just go home and like take vitamin C too. I was like, what? This is not how it works. In fact, when I started, studying biomedical sciences, that's when I started learning about the harmful effects of, consumption of animal products. But before that, I really didn't even think about that. It was mostly for animals.
Is there anything about or from your cancer research that shows like whether or not eating animals is a risk factor or protective, or eating plants is a risk factor or protective, either way?
Yeah, so besides my master's, my PhD was also about protein research. So I did protein structure and function. And something that stood out to me was methionine, which is one of the amino acids. It's an essential amino acid. We need it. But it turns out that animal products, be it meat, egg, dairy, their methionine content is really high. And it turned out that cancer cells rely on methionine so much more than our normal cells. Our normal cells can actually recycle methionine, so they're much better in thriving with very little methionine. But cancer cells a lot of times don't have that ability, so they need to be fed methionine consistently. And turns out it's very abundant in animal products. Mm-hmm. So when I started looking into it, there is actually a lot of research showing that you can starve cancer cells from methionine and they shrink, they go away, or at least, at the very least, they don't grow as much. They can't grow without methionine. Even in breast cancer cell lines, if we grow them in a lab, in a petri dish, normal cells, normal breast cells, we can just do it without methionine. But if it's breast cancer cell, then we have to add methionine because otherwise they don't survive.
Now I've heard about also methionine involved in the synthesis of amyloid plaques in the brain. Have you heard about anything like that?
I know about amyloid plaques, but I don't know about the correlation between methionine.
And I have heard, like you're saying, restricting it, methionine restriction, I think Dr. T. Colin Campbell talks about that some. What if they just ate nominal amount of animal protein and didn't eat a bunch of plants?
Well, to be clear, I think the methionine it may increase the risk of cancer or it may reduce your ability to fight cancer because you're feeding your cancers. At the end, the problem with animal protein is that, it's high in methionine, but also it's generally packed with other stuff that you don't want. So the better question is that if you can get the same protein, which is better, it has less methionine, but it's packed, it comes with fiber, it comes without cholesterol, it comes with tons of vitamins. Why would you go that way to get your protein from animal sources where it comes with heme iron, which can be metabolized to carcinogenic compounds? It comes without any fiber, it comes with cholesterol and saturated fat and endotoxins. So endotoxins are something that I've done a lot of research on. I work in pharmaceutical companies, and one of the things I did was to make sure that the final products, the final drugs, are endotoxin free. Just to explain what they are residuals of gram-negative bacteria. So our body is designed to freak out when you have gram-negative bacteria in our blood. But the way our body detects this bacteria, your white blood cells don't have eyes to tell, oh, that's a bacteria or bacterium. They react with these things that you can find in the cell wall of bacteria, which is basically the endotoxins. So when you have endotoxins in your blood, your cells don't know that this is live or dead bacteria. Evolutionary, that doesn't make any sense for them to detect if it's live or dead, because generally if it's dead, it'll clear up anyways. So they react the same way. So what it means is that when you have endotoxins in your blood, you have inflammation. Your body basically freaks out. And it sends a lot of like white blood cells, it increases inflammation. You can think about it as sending SWAT. So it's like a red alarm. You have a terrorist, you have something terrible happening, send SWAT. When SWAT arrives, you have inflammation, you have redness, it heats up, but it can be systemic, right? So if I punch myself, it gets red, but the same thing, it's systemic, it's your whole body.
I wonder, like, when the animal's killed, is there any moment where that response you're talking about, if people are consuming that even?
I don't know if I can specifically answer the question, but for sure when the animals are extremely stressed and distressed before they're being slaughtered, I'm sure there's a lot of like hormones and compounds that are secreted into their blood that are probably not healthy for us to consume.
Anytime I do like a series or a run of these interviews, somebody inevitably pops up and says they believe you're consuming that animal's fear, and
I've heard that, and I mean it makes sense in a way that if the moment that you're afraid or you're scared, suddenly there are tons of hormones that are released, so that totally makes sense.
You've talked about excess methionine, endotoxins, heme iron, cholesterol. It's a package deal, right? Is your specific day job, is there anything there that enlightens you further or that you could share that might be interesting related to this?
Yeah, so I worked for a couple of years in pharmaceutical companies. We developed drugs for like anti-inflammatory drugs that helped cancer patients and patients suffering from systemic inflammation. Think how much we have to go through to just like isolate this protein as a drug for inflammation, whereas even when I worked on cancer research before, pretty much any disease that I've ever worked on, the root cause was basically consuming animal products. That fact always nagged me that yes, we can do all of this, or we can just not consume animal products. So I don't say not consuming animal products is a solution to literally all diseases, it's not that. But I always ask myself, my time is limited, my energy is limited. If I want to solve a problem, if I want to cure a disease, which one do I want to cure? Obviously the one that kills the most number of people. What are they? Cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, kidney failure, cancer, and all of that. And majority of these diseases, and obesity that leads to other problems, majority of these diseases are caused by consumption of animal products. And that's why I had a very hard time convincing myself to work on this tiny little issue when the huge problem exists and we are not addressing the elephant in the room, which is consumption of animal products.
Now, the opposition or the anti-vegans or whatever we want to call them, the carnivores, the ketos, whatever, they might say maybe it's cutting out carbs, maybe it's processed carbs, or they'll usually say carbs and just leave it at that, but I think they're just trying to say processed carbs. I mean, is there any research out there that really controls for that and looks at the best side of both, like their best side being like a clean, lean, whatever meat that's not, overcooked, whatever, maybe even raw, compared to like, whole plant food diet? Is there anything out there doing that?
I'm not sure specifically about that, but what I know is that you can always go and see what compounds there are in these meats. And see if there is any research that isolated that one compound. For instance, in this case, you have saturated fat, you have cholesterol, you have heme iron. Doesn't matter where the source of the meat is. you're gonna have heme iron. Even white meat, even like chicken has heme iron. And then there is clear evidence showing that heme iron gets metabolized to a carcinogenic compound. You know, we have a lot of evidence on cholesterol and all that. That's one way to look at all that.
Is there any evidence that plants have problems? Because sometimes the opposition also says, oh, there's mycotoxins, or there's lectins, or phytates, or saponins, or, you know, any number of anti-nutrients, or whatever they want to call them. Is that of any concern, or has that ever come up in your research?
I don't have experience on that from my research perspective, like actual in-lab research. But what I can say is that if you look at the diets of people who lived, you know, over 100 years, or the longest lived people in the world, you can actually even factor out the geographical differences, and what you are left with is that these people consumed mainly plant-based. Even if you look at the diet of blue zones, you see that they even consume very little fish. And it's like 95%, over 95% plant-based.
What's the most compelling evidence or research paper, like an EPIC study or Nurses or Adventist, or is there a certain study out there that really sells what you're saying?
The amount of evidence that we have on prevention of cardiovascular diseases, cancer, diabetes and all that with plant-based diet, you just can't deny that. And these are top causes, like literally top causes of death. It's more than just one paper, it's just the fact that this is a very well-known fact that plant-based diet can reduce the risk of all these top causes of death. That together with the fact that we know vegetarians and vegans live longer, and like I mentioned, you look at the longest lived people on the planet and they eat plant-based. So that's a clear evidence that you know, plant-based diet is healthy. And then we have, on the other hand, athletes, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They have a really good database of. They have a really good paper on showing how athletes have better performance when they're on plant-based diet. So the amount of evidence that we have is overwhelming. I think there is a problem with just nutrition research, that there is a lot of like back and forth, and you can always find, you know, oh, here's a paper that showed this, you know, about cholesterol, that cholesterol actually doesn't like, you know, increase the risk of cardiovascular diseases, versus this paper that says it does. And a lot of times you have to go and look at their methodology and who funded the research, and there is just so much into it. I guess recommendation for a general audience is that when was the last time that you saw a paper that questions whether apples are healthy or not? It's always about meat, it's always about cholesterol, right? Because you may have papers on both sides. But on plant-based diet, you don't have papers on both sides. There is no paper that says blueberries cause cancer. Another thing that is really powerful is if you look at our physiology, we're not meant to consume animal products. What that means is, even if you can convince me that there are some animal products, there is some degree of animal products that we can tolerate, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for us or we are designed to do that. If you really think about it, we all have enzymes to digest lactose, but we lose this enzyme unless you're a mutant, if you're a white person, most likely. So it's not, when people say they are lactose intolerant, I'm like, no, you are normal. There is a group of white people who are mutant, literally. And because of that, they can tolerate lactose. What it tells you is that we are not designed to have milk as in our adolescence. You know, now you can come to me and say, hey, milk shows it's good, or it's, you know, studies showed milk is good or not. You're not designed to have milk. Same thing is true about meat. Like, you know, it really bothers me when people say, oh, we are carnivores. Oh, really? Can you run after, you can't even run after a, you know, goddamn squirrel, right? Are you, and they say, oh, your teeth. Are you telling me that you can, like a cow, the most like gentle animal, are you telling me that you can just go to a cow, just the same way that a lion just attacks a cow, you can just go attack a cow and just try to just take a bite out of a cat, do you think these teeth can penetrate like their skin?
Yeah.
Right? And then you look at our intestines length, you look at our enzymes that we have. A real carnivore can literally just go to this like spoiled meat and just like say, okay, this is tasty, I'm gonna eat this. But you know, if you don't find roadkills tasty, that's a clear sign that you're not a carnivore. And you know, again, looking at our physiology, we just don't have the tools. Literally the only tool that we are using to be able to deal with meat problem is our intelligence. So we cook it, so we literally disinfect the crap out of meat to make sure we don't die from diseases. We denature, we unfold the proteins so we can digest them, otherwise we can't. You also look at our closest ancestors or closest relatives, and you see that they also primarily consume plant-based diets. So what evidence better than that do you want to show you that we are designed to have, to follow a plant-based diet and not meat, not dairy? You know, I honestly think like consumption of egg and milk is weird, but it's fine. We do weird things, and it's not bad because it's weird. It's not bad because we just eat eggs from, I don't know, other species, or like breast milk of another species. I mean, it's very weird, but it's not bad because it's weird. It's bad because it shows you that you're not designed to have milk. There is no other animal that relies on eating eggs of other species. There are some that steal eggs when they are, it can be a source of food for them, but it's not their primary source of food.
Yeah, I mean snakes do.
Yeah.
But we're not really designed like a snake.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of reptiles that do.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily rely on eating eggs of other animals. Sometimes, when they come across it, they might.
I wish there was something that really showcased the totality of evidence, so that people wouldn't get this misinformation from the carnivore movement that's purely anecdotally based. Is there a way you could articulate in an elevator the totality of evidence? When I do, I say, well, we've got True North, Hippocrates Wellness, we've got the Ornish program that's funded by Medicare and it's non-invasive for cardiometabolic disease. We've got PCRM and we got Nutrition Facts, and sure, you might say they're biased because they're run by vegans, but of course they're vegans because, if you think crack's bad, you're going to say, oh, well, this person is biased because they don't do crack.
Yeah.
There's so much evidence, and why don't they have anything that delineates it like this? All they have are anecdotes. So, that's kind of like the tangent I might go on, and I can keep going, but I'm curious, do you have one? You've kind of done that a little bit already, I think, but I'm just curious if there was any sort of elevator pitch tangent you might have for the totality of evidence that,
Sometimes when I do outreach and I talk to people about veganism, a lot of times they bring up the protein problem, which is the one that particularly annoys me because I literally have done my, doctorate on proteins. The best way to answer this question is to say, do you think it's possible to be vegan and be healthy? And a lot of people just say yes. Most people at least know somebody in their family who's vegan. Yeah, the question that annoys me the most is when people say, proteins or other nutrients. A lot of times if you actually ask them, what nutrient? They just don't have an answer.
Oh, they'll throw out K2 or 12
B12. Most people just don't know any of this. They just hear that, vegans are deficient, or it's just a lot of times when you ask people, these excuses are generally not genuine. So they've just heard something, and when you ask them, when you say, I'll just give you another example. They say going vegan is expensive, and you ask them, how so? What have you bought before vegan that you think is expensive? And the answer is they actually haven't tried. They just heard that going vegan is expensive. And then I have to explain that just like any other diet, so the dietary part of veganism is just like any other diet. You can do it cheaply, you can do it expensively. Whether you want to buy Beyond Burger, whether you want to buy expensive cheese, it's totally up to you, but you can also buy legumes, rice, beans, whatever, make it can be literally the cheapest diet on earth. So when they say, here, proteins, you say, what about proteins? Have you looked at an elephant? Do you really think that you need more protein than, an elephant?
Yeah, but then they'll say, well, I'm not going to eat what an elephant eats. Right.
But the idea is just to show that you can get your proteins from plants, right?
Mm-hmm. But they got a good point when they say we're not going to eat we don't eat grass, right? I mean, or whatever they might eat,
So that's a real challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges is that people think that vegans eat just salads and like really lame and tasteless food. And that's a picture I had in mind. So when I went vegan, I had precisely zero vegan friends. So I didn't know how to do it. I was like, all right, I just have to eat lettuce for the rest of my life. Literally. I didn't eat cheese, chocolate, none of that for a year because I just didn't know they existed. And apparently I was not great at researching this stuff. I never Googled, what should I eat.
You mean how to make like an alternative cheese?
Yeah, I had no idea. So I had none of that for a year. So I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have that we really need to fix to show them that there's tasty vegan food. There's the anatomy thing. There is the actual evidence that we have to show that vegans, vegetarians live longer. There is our closest relatives, what they ate. But I would say that there is a problem there where it is possible to be below certain thresholds and be able to, if you're super active, if you're, eating better meat and less processed meats, that you can be so much healthier than someone who, of course, eats literally just junk food, right? So that's why I personally think that it really helps to bring in the ethics part to the question. Say that to focus more on, let's agree that it is possible to be healthy on a vegan diet. Mm-hmm. So you can either approach that this is killing you, or you can say it is possible to be vegan. Mm-hmm. I kind of do both. I think it's great to do both. But I think eventually all that matters is that you can be healthy and you can completely survive and get all the nutrients that you need from a plant-based diet, which makes eating meat unnecessary. So then, if you know that you can live like this, but this one causes a lot of suffering and is potentially bad for you, then why not choosing this?
If we have the option, we don't know, either way it could work. Well, why not choose the one that fosters the most non-violent world,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to add something that I always encourage people to basically go vegan for the ethics, because there is one advantage there, that you don't cheat on your ethics. We all have gone on diets before. We try to do recycling, but maybe sometimes when no one is looking, we just don't recycle. We say, oh, I'm gonna lose weight, but you go to a party and just delicious cake or whatever, you just eat it. But I had a guy who came to me and said, hey man, you're right, I like everything you say about veganism, but sometimes it's 3 a.m., I don't have vegan food in my fridge, all the vegan restaurants are closed, and I just have to eat whatever there is. And I said, has there ever been a situation where all the stores were closed, you didn't have any food at home, and then you look at your dog, you were like, well, I'm sorry, buddy, today is the date. And he laughed. And I said, that's because you just never look at your dog as food. It's not an option. No matter how hungry you are, eating your dog is not an option. So I think that's the power of going vegan for ethics, because you're not gonna cheat on it. Another benefit is that if you go to a party, so to the point that Peter Singer was making today, that you go to a party, the cake is already there is no vegan alternative, so why not just eating that, because you're not technically increasing suffering or decreasing suffering in any meaningful manner. But then that's a first order effect, but you have secondary and tertiary order effects. It's when someone else looking at you and they say that you refuse to eat this cake, and you say, that's why, and then they're like, oh, I didn't know this about milk or dairy or egg. Maybe next time they actually have. So if you don't refuse to eat that cake, you are almost guaranteed to not have vegan cake on the next birthday. So every time that we don't refuse to eat animal products, we are basically saying that consumption of animal products is okay. We contribute to this thing being so normal. And that's why I think there is so much merit in just refusing it. Even if it, at least on the surface, it doesn't make a big difference.
What does your family think about this?
My dad, I think, is going vegan, and my mom pretty much is vegan, so they both, and they're divorced, they're different part of the world, but I think they're both very close to go vegan.
Could you be with somebody who isn't vegan?
No, absolutely not. I mean, as colleagues or whatever, something that I can't do anything about, that's a different story, but literally my goal is to reduce suffering to animals. So how can my partner and friend truly contribute to the problem that I'm trying to stop? It's a huge difference in values. I rather want to be with someone who holds me accountable. I want to be with someone who, when I go to a party and I lose the courage to speak up about animals, he says, hey, you need to speak up, don't lose your courage. It happened today in my talk. I was preparing for my presentation and I was trying to be a little more gentle because I didn't want to lose some of my personal relationships with people. And a very good friend came to me and said, no, don't compromise for animals. So that's the kind of person that I want. I want my partner or my friends to make me a better person and not bring me down. I would date someone who's not vegan only just so that I can give them a opportunity to become vegan. But after they know me, after I provide them with all the evidences and the reasons to go vegan, if they choose to abuse animals, I don't think that would be a constructive relationship.
If somebody sat in front of you, maybe you're on a date, maybe it's just a friend, whatever, and they said, is it okay if I order chicken? What would you say?
I hope I have the courage to say that, are you asking if it's okay for me or is it okay for you? Because you're not harming me, but you're harming another animal. I guess in a way, when people say, oh, I'm so sorry for, they know I'm vegan, they eat non-vegan stuff in front of me and they say, I'm sorry, I always say, you don't have to apologize to me, you're eating someone else. In a way, when people apologize, they kind of, they're trying to play this game that I'm respecting you so that you can respect me. But it doesn't work that way. We don't do that in other forms of oppression. We don't say, excuse me, I'm just going to be a little racist here. Excuse me, I'm just going to beat this child here. You saying that you're sorry does not make whatever is happening okay.
I heard your talk was pretty powerful today. What kind of stuff did you hit on to make people, I guess, emotional? I'm
from Iran. I went to a lot of protests. I really came really close to getting killed in some of these protests. I'm also gay. I grew up with a lot of oppression, and homosexuality is a big taboo. I could never accept myself. I thought I was mentally ill. I thought it goes away, forced myself to find a girlfriend. So a lot of forms of oppression that I experienced, but the whole time I was oppressing animals. So in my talk, I was basically making a connection between all these different forms of human oppression and animal oppression and how they basically interconnect. My point was, when we advocate for animals, a lot of people suggest, let's reduce meat consumption, let's treat animals more humanely. And I think when we focus on that, we should ask ourselves if this stuff is a sound solution for other forms of injustice. So if I'm beating my child and you're trying to stop me, would you accept if I say, you're right, I'm just gonna beat my child, 2 days a week? It becomes laughable. So sometimes solutions that we offer for animal rights, when we apply them to other places, they just become laughable and extremely offensive to the victims. So the point I was making was, if we fight for animals, we should apply the same standards in other forms of injustice. So I think when you go to grocery stores, when you go to Whole Foods, you see all this humanely raised, certified that, certified this, grass-fed, organic, and all these marketing labelings that are meant to make consumers feel better about choices, but they make little to no difference in animals' lives.
It's almost like they're apologizing or something.
Yeah, and the problem is, I have no problem with reducing suffering as much as we can, but the problem with this way of thinking is we are not thinking about secondary effects. So yes, on the surface, it looks like a little more room for chickens is better for a lot of chickens, and I agree with that, but the problem is it gives people this false sense that it's okay to eat these animals because they were treated humanely. Industries know that, and that's why they label everything now cage-free, grass-fed, humanely raised.
Now, you said, I think at one time you were working on a documentary or something.
Yeah, I'm working on a documentary on alternatives to animal testing.
Yeah, is that something we could expect anytime soon?
Probably in a year or two.
Cool. How can people follow you, maybe learn more about that when it's about to come out and whatnot? Do you have like an Instagram or a Facebook?
Yes, it's just Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. It's all my name, Dr. Faraz Harsini.
And do you have a quote you want to share real quick?
I guess one of my favorite quotes is, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So we have to realize that what's happening to animals is injustice. And as such, it deserves to be treated just like any other form of injustice. And once we realize that, we see that the common roots of all kinds of oppression in humans and animals goes down to basically oppression of humans. Every time we oppress other people, it's because we are focusing on our differences. Humans, of course, are different, right? We have different colors, different races, but our differences are not morally relevant to the way that we should be treated. And every time that we focus on our differences, that's what led to racism, sexism, homophobia, and all of that. And that's exactly how people justify harming animals, because they say, oh, we are different. These are just animals. This is exactly how we justified mass murders of people, because we called them, oh, those are just animals. So that's a very, very dark territory when we go there, when we focus on our differences. And I always say, animal rights doesn't mean that we are equal to other animals. Of course we are not. I think that's one of the big problems, because when you say animal rights, people say, oh, we are smarter. Maybe, yeah, sure, but our differences are not morally relevant to the way that these animals should be treated. The only thing that matters is that the only relevant question is, will they suffer? Will they feel pain? If you stab me, it hurts. If you stab an animal, it hurts. The question is not who suffers more. I don't say maybe a human suffers more, maybe an animal suffers more. The question is not, it's not a competition who suffers more. The question is, do they suffer? I think anyone who's not pretty much 100% ignorant can admit that yes, they do suffer. And the question is, if you can be healthy, if you can be strong and happy without hurting these animals, why not?
One thing about that real quick, some people might say, well, I eat grass-fed and they live a good life, or, I hunt, I only eat meat I hunt. At the end of the day, though, it's unsustainable, which means it inevitably leads to abuse, because not everybody can eat grass-fed, not everybody can eat the meat you hunted.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, a lot of times when people say, oh, don't worry, I just hunt, that's like a deflection, because you ask them, what did you have for lunch? They went to McDonald's, right? They make it sound like they're literally living in a jungle and they hunt for breakfast, lunch, dinner. First of all, that's a tactic that they use to distract you, to distract the conversation from factory farming and eating animals to this hypothetical that probably happens once a year or whatever. And even then, you're killing an animal living naturally, and if the animal is having a happy life, then you are taking a happy life. So that's in a way even worse than taking a miserable life.
And then even, what if it was a mother of a...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So these animals still have a social life. So you kill a mother, you kill a father. Maybe the children are waiting for that, parent to come home. Even let's say it's just like a single, old deer just walking around happily. If you like your bodily autonomy, if it's wrong to kill you without pain, then it's wrong to kill that animal for nothing. If it's a matter of survival, that's a different story. But for you to take away another animal's life for any reason, just because you like the taste, that's wrong. And I just say this, when people say, the footage you're showing here, the animal slaughtering, factory farming, whatever, is wrong, we just have to do it more humanely. I generally ask people, define humane. First of all, they can't, so I have to explain to them that humane means act of compassion. Humane means act of kindness. An example of killing an animal humanely is when you put down a dog who's sick and old, because you do that because of them, for them, because you want to try to be kind and compassionate to them. When you kill an animal because you like the way they taste under your teeth, that's selfish, and as such, it can never be compassionate. A lot of people say, oh, if you do it painlessly, it's okay. And I try to make this comparison. I say, it sounds like you want to do something that is inherently wrong in a good way, and that just doesn't work. For instance, if I kill someone and torture them and then kill them, it's really bad. But if I drug them so they don't suffer and kill them, it's less bad, but it's still wrong, right? So if I go to a court and I say, hey, they didn't suffer, they're not just going to let me out just because they didn't suffer. I still did something wrong. And a very good way to approach that is to ask people, why do you want these animals not to suffer? If you care, they say because they care, right? So if you care about them, wouldn't the best solution be not to eat them to begin with? So when they think about humane, that means that they are compassionate people, but they still like the taste. They're still looking at animals as food. So it's our job to make sure that they can change their perspective, the same way that they don't see a dog as food, and it's never an option to eat a dog. We have to do the same thing for these animals. So the way that I change people's perspective on how they view animals is by asking them a couple of questions. The first question I ask is, do you think this is injustice? And most people say yes. The second question I ask is, the solutions that you're telling me, humanely raised meat, maybe reducing meat consumption or whatever, would you use these solutions for any other form of oppression? Like if I was beating my child, would you accept if I just beat my child 2 days a week instead of every day? They say no. And I ask him, if you were being abused, if someone was abusing you, how urgently would you want them to stop? Would you want them to stop immediately, or would you want them to take baby steps? They say immediately, right? So somehow when it comes to animals, they say, okay, yeah, you're right, I'm gonna think about it. Maybe I reduce, I don't see it in myself to quit. I ask them, if it was you, would you want it to stop immediately? They say yes. And lastly, I ask them, when they say going vegan is hard, you have two ways to approach this. You can either take 3 hours to explain that, oh, there is Beyond Burger, there is this, and then they say vegan cheese sucks, and then you have to say you have to try more brands, or you can just say, do you think it's harder for you to go vegan, or do you think it's harder for this animal to go through that? These three questions are troll-free. Everyone who is not like an absolute troll with just a little honesty would say it's harder for the animal. So that's how you change their perspective. And once they don't see these animals as food, then figuring out how becomes really easy.
What else do you do? And explain where we're at today.
Okay, I do a bunch of different things. So my job is bioprocessing senior scientist at the Good Food Institute. So I work on cultivated meat. And to that I say I have no problem with meat itself. I have problem with suffering. So if you can't have that meat without causing suffering, eat whatever you want. So that's my daily job. I also have a nonprofit called Allied Scholars for Animal Protection. So I noticed that animal advocacy in universities is very ineffective and unsustainable. So that's the problem that I'm trying to address. So I empower student advocates to advocate for humans and non-human animals alike. And I give them the support and everything they need so that they can have a sustainable animal advocacy student group in universities.
And is there a website for that?
Yes, it's called alliedscholars.org.
And where are we at today?
We are at Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit in Washington, D.C.
Cool. And I appreciate it, man.
Fantastic.
You're awesome. Thank
I'm
you.
honored.